Hey guys, Jesse Laval, welcome back to the channel. As promised, we've got the iPhone 13 Pro that came in, and we're going to do a little review about it. So the A15 processor that powers this phone consists of a 6-core CPU, a 5-core GPU, and a 16-core neural engine. Now this phone has a 6.1-inch display, 2532 by 1170 resolution, has 460 ppi or pixel density. Now one really cool thing is the ProMotion display that comes with this phone. Now it goes up to 120 Hz. And so far, for me using it, it's been absolutely flawless. You don't notice any type of hiccuping or anything, and that was something that I was wondering about because they talked about how it's an adaptive refresh rate and not just locked at 120 Hz. So when you want to see something at really fast refresh rates, you're going to be able to see it at 120 Hz. When you're just doing something like, kind of web browsing or reading something, you're going to see it at as low as 10 Hz. That's a cool feature that seems to have been executed perfectly. Now one thing that really is noticeable about the iPhone 13 is it is a bit heavy and it weighs 204 grams. That's for the iPhone 13 Pro. One thing that stood out to me right away was this screen is extremely bright at 1200 nits. It's also water resistant, which we've come to expect from phones in this day and age. It also comes equipped with LiDAR to assist with the facial ID recognition. It works very well. So now that we kind of went down the initial specs of the phone, let's just talk about the camera for a second. Now this new system has used all 12 megapixel sensors. Now that seems to be like a disappointment if you're just looking at the megapixels, because some of the newer phones are coming out with crazy like over 100 megapixels or 50 megapixels. To me, megapixels really aren't the biggest thing that I look for in a camera, and again, it's just a phone, so not a big deal at all to me. The telephoto lens aperture is at f2.8, the wide lens is at f1.5, and the ultra wide lens is at f1.8, giving you a 120 degree field of view. Now you do have 3x, 2x, and 6x optical zooming, as well as having the option for a 15x digital zoom. It also comes equipped with night mode, portrait mode, stabilization, smart HDR, macro photography. Macro photography is really cool, and that's a really nice feature that they added. It also has Apple Pro RAW. That's about it when it comes to the specs of the camera. Now, if we move on to the video modes here, we have cinematic mode. Now, cinematic mode is one of the coolest things that are coming out of this camera, and that's basically the ability to record a scene. And what I've noticed is it will show you a couple of different focus points that it could choose, but you don't have to actually select any of these focus points while you record. You just record the scene, it records the scene all in focus, and what it's doing is creating a depth map, and then later in you can go into post, and you can actually change where the focus is going to be, and you can also change what the aperture, I guess, it's not actually changing the aperture obviously because it's in post, but it's going to change the look of how the image is being produced as if it was being shot at that aperture. So you can make it have like a really nice shallow depth of field and have it focused on one face, and then at whatever point you choose in the scene you can then change the focus to another subject, which is like a really cool thing that software is able to do now. Now you're gonna have HDR recording at 4K up to 60 frames per second. You're going to have 1080p at 25, 30, and 60 frames per second. ProRes recording is in 4K at 30 frames per second unless you chose to get the 128GB model. Then you're going to be limited to 1080p at 30 frames a second. Now in video modes you will have 2x, 3x, and 6x optical zoom. You're also going to have 9x digital zoom. Slow motion video can be recorded at 1080p at 120 frames per second or 240 frames per second. Time-lapse video modes do support stabilization. That's really cool. Cinematic video with stabilization is supported in 1080p and 720p. It has continuous autofocus. You also can pull 8 megapixel still photos while recording 4K video. We have video formats recorded are HEVC or H.265. So those are your two video formats. Now, just from initially playing with the camera, it's actually really cool. Like, I don't really get that gussied up about video or, stills on my phone. I really don't use my phone for video or pictures that much. Maybe that'll change now with the iPhone 13 Pro. I think some of the things that it's able to do in video, I probably will use, just because, one, they're cool and they're fun to try out, but it's just kind of nice that now I have a phone that matches up quite nicely with my R6 and my RP as far as shooting in 4K 60 or any of the other frame rates that my cameras shoot in. So now that I'm going to be able to shoot in ProRes, that's going to be fun to see what it's going to be like when I'm putting that up with editing with some of the footage coming out of my R6. So I'm kind of excited about it. I did go out and play with it a little bit. I shot a couple of scenes in cinematic mode that I'm going to show you now. I went out into my garden and I shot some pictures of my bees. Now, I shot some stuff with optical view of 1.3 and ×6, and then I even zoomed into ×9 using the digital zoom. The stabilization worked really well, and it's actually really cool to be able to get that sharp a video at 4K 60 frames per second on my phone. I can really see myself like supporting some of the video stuff that I do with just B-roll shots out of this phone. And I wouldn't have done that with my old Pixel 2 XL. So I think, you know, the upgrade to the camera system here is actually kind of worthwhile, and I'm excited about it. Now, what are some of the bad things that maybe I noticed about this phone that I didn't see any of the other YouTubers talking about? One thing is the heat that this thing produces. It seems like the A15 chip can really produce some serious heat. Now, when I initially set up the phone and it was downloading everything off the cloud, it got really hot. Not a big problem. That's happened with pretty much all of the smartphones that I've ever had. But when I went and plugged it into the charger, it also got extremely hot. So, I mean, maybe it's not a big deal. I was talking to one of my other friends that owned the iPhone, and he said his gets hot as well. I think he has like an old iPhone 8 or something. He said his gets hot as well when he charges it, so maybe it's not really a cause for concern. I just always get a little bit concerned when my electronic devices run hot, because it's like, what is that going to say for the longevity of, one, the CPU, or two, the battery? Other than that, you know, I really think it's a great phone. Like, the display looks absolutely stellar, as I knew it was going to. I have the iPad 2 Air. Loved everything about that. That's why I kind of made the jump over to iPhone. I've always been an Android user myself. The other big thing is, now that I'm into photography so much, iOS supports from my Canon cameras, when I wirelessly transfer my images, I can wirelessly send my raw photos into iOS, where for some reason in Android it's not supported, and it turns into a JPEG. So that's kind of a big thing as far as just being able to on the fly, which I don't do this very often, but it's kind of nice to have the option where on the fly now I can just have my iPhone, have my camera, I can take some shots, transfer the raw, I can edit those in Photoshop, and I could upload a shot really quick just with my iPhone and my camera. So that's really kind of a really cool feature to have. Alright guys, so let's just talk about the build of the overall phone for a second. Now, obviously it's an Apple product. It looks like every other Apple product. I ended up getting the Sierra Blue, my favorite color as far as what's come out for the iPhones right now. So looks really cool. I'm really happy with it. Super sleek, super nice. Like I said, it feels really heavy. Not really heavy, but it's definitely like, it's all there. Let's just say that. Now, you've got an extremely large camera bump, and I'm going to advise that you get what you're seeing here. And this is just a little protector, a glass, or I think it's sapphire protector that goes and stamps right on top of that camera. Because I'm just telling you, like, as sleek and nice as this device is, the camera just sticks out so far, and then you've just got the element right there. So, like, if you don't have a case with a decent bump around it, and you don't opt to get one of these, even with the bump around it, I would still be concerned about scratching these lenses, putting it down on anything, unless I had this. This thing works really good. It was like $9. Doesn't seem to cause any image degradation to it at all. Sticks right on there very easily. It's case friendly, fits right into the case, no problem. So definitely advise you to get that. That's definitely, like, for me at least, took away from the anxiety of thinking about even, I mean, I wouldn't even want to put it in my pocket without this, to be completely honest. It would probably just get scratched. Screen, super nice. Battery life seems to be very good. I've only used it for about not even a full day yet, but it's definitely better battery life than what my Google Pixel 2 XL was doing. Now, that thing was like 4 or 5 years old. But it definitely seems to be better battery life even than what I remember that doing in the beginning. So happy about that, and I'm happy to have the extra weight on the phone if that means that I'm able to get through all day. Now, I've been using this since like 5 a.m. pretty much nonstop, and I've still got 63%. It's now 3:30 p.m. now. So, I mean, this thing is lasting pretty good. I think it's definitely going to go through the whole day for me. That's when I'm having a brand new phone right now, so I'm pretty much can't leave it alone for 2 seconds. So it's on 24/7, definitely lasting. So that's something that's really happy to report. Please think about going below, subscribing, clicking the notification bell, and look forward to other videos about this phone. Again, this is more or less just an initial thoughts. I've only been using it for about 24 hours. So I'm going to put out another video that's going to be a definitive review after I've spent a couple of weeks with it and I've really gotten to know the ins and outs of this phone.